Orson Welles is an auteurist filmmaker whose repeated use of narcissistic associated imagery, especially shown through mirrors and reflections, demonstrate and serve as a clear connection to Welles's own narcissism, and nowhere is this displayed more evidently than in this 5-minute sequence from Citizen Kane. As displayed in the start of the sequence, Kane's second wife Susan leaves Kane, and Kane is seen standing in empty halls of Xanadu, a portrait of Kane's narcissistic self. Xanadu is the first reference to Kane's narcissism, as Kane built Xanadu in order to bolster the narcissistic view of himself. As seen, Kane's Xanadu is empty, without human contact, which is an example of the false self the narcissist often erects. As Orson Welles himself stated, the protagonist of My Failure story must retreat from a democracy which his money fails to buy and his power fails to control. And the need to control is associated with narcissism. Since Kane, however, is no longer in control, he builds a monument to himself to further back up the statement as accordingly.
Xanadu is the costliest monument a man has built to himself.
In terms, Xanadu serves as an example of a narcissist's perception of his own grandiosity. In terms of Kane's narcissistic self, Susan leaving Kane is a further link to his narcissism, which is clearly demonstrated by Kane trashing Susan's room. Kane in his role is portrayed as narcissistic. This is because Citizen Kane in its entirety has often been considered a character study of the narcissistic personality. Kane in terms can be categorized under the psychoanalytical description of the id, as he follows his desires irrespective of the hurt he may cause, proving as a further backup, narcissism is also associated with the id. As Orson Welles stated, Kane is a man who has money, and since he doesn't have to concern himself with making more, naturally wishes to use it for the exercise of power. As mentioned before, the need to control is associated with narcissism. Kane in terms seeks attention and admiration, which is a further link to narcissism. However, since Susan leaves Kane, she in terms denies Kane's desire for admiration or attention. Since Kane cannot have what he wants, he as a result falls into a narcissistic rage, which is a reaction to his feelings of helplessness because of his inability to control Susan or anyone else, therefore backing up the statement made. The final and most prominent link to narcissism in the sequence is Kane walking by a hall of mirrors. Even though this essay has proven that the scenes within the chosen sequence are a clear and prominent display of narcissism, the Hall of Mirrors is the ultimate proof of this claim. This is because the mirror is a link to narcissism. To further back up the statement, when considering the scene where Kane's closest friend states,
"You don't care about anything except you. You just want to persuade people that you love them so much that they ought to love you back."
And Kane's second wife states,
"Love me? You want me to love you? Sure. I'm Charles Foster Kane. Whatever you want, just name it and it's yours. But you gotta love me."
Kane, therefore, similar to Narcissus in Greek mythology, aspires an impossible love in others. Narcissus, the archetype of narcissism itself, is known to have been in love with his own reflection, hence associating narcissism to mirrors and reflections, and ultimately connecting the reflection of Kane to narcissism. This is because the mirror is a window to the interior self, and also a link to narcissism. Therefore, this sequence in its totality, especially through the Hall of Mirrors, ultimately portrays Kane's portrayal as a narcissistic personality whose friends and lovers dropped away, leaving him alone, as shown through the images on screen in a castle filled with numberless artwork backing up the claim made. The usage of mirrors and reflections is not only seen in the sequence chosen, but also in other films of Wells in totality, establishing a connection to Wells's own narcissism. Having established that reflection and mirrors in Wells's Cain link to narcissism, when considering his further work, a clear pattern of the usage of mirrors and reflections is shown. The Lady from Shanghai is a prominent example of this, as the mirror hall scene features the destruction of a narcissistic motive. This is because, in the mirror maze shootout, Elsa's reflection is fragmented. In Touch of Evil, Hank Quillen falls into the reflecting water, proving as a link to Narcissus, as Narcissus also fell into the river, reflecting his own image. Finally, Don Quixote features a man convinced of his own grandiosity, which is, as mentioned before, associated to narcissism. The theme of the reflected image and its link to narcissism in Wells's films links back to the biographical details of Wells, as he, according to the Hayden Film Institute, was known to be quite narcissistic. Further backing up this claim, Christopher Wells, the daughter of Orson Welles, stated in an interview, by accepting his selfishness. Selfishness in general is not associated with narcissism, even though narcissists, as a general rule, are very selfish. However, in the case of Wells, he suffered from multiple narcissistic inquiries. In terms, if Citizen Kane is a character study of a narcissistic persona, this persona is clearly displayed in the sequence chosen, and when considering that Wells's other films also feature the mirror or reflection, which are the most prominent association to narcissism, the sequence from Citizen Kane and the scenes of Wells's other films, according to the evidence stated, link back to Wells's own narcissism, ultimately backing up the claim made. In conclusion, Orson Welles' repeated use of narcissistic associated imagery, especially shown through mirrors and reflections, has demonstrated and served as a clear connection to Welles' own narcissism.